Welcome to Working on Wellness, Health and Mind's bi-weekly wellness podcast where we discuss wellness through the lenses of mindfulness, mental health, nutrition, sleep, exercise, and healthy relationships. Today's a bit of a different episode as we meet with Charlotte to discuss her journey to become a counselor. And as always, we'd like to remind you that you can learn more about the Six Tenants of Wellness and how to get connected with us here at Health and Mind by clicking the link in the show notes. Maybe we should start right there, just kind of an introduction. Charlotte, would you just tell the podcast listeners a little bit about yourself?
Hi, everyone. My name is Charlotte Harvey. I am currently a resident at Health and Mind, and my journey to this point has been with Health and Mind. I started with them as a practicum student in August of 2020, I believe, and moved into being an intern with them, and I'm now completing my residency with Health and Mind.
Yes, so Charlotte is part of the Health and Mind team, and I don't think you've been on the podcast yet. I think this is your first time, right?
It is, yes.
Cool. Well, thank you for joining us. We don't have a huge team, so we're going to hopefully get everybody on here eventually, but Charlotte was the first one willing to come on and talk a little bit about her journey. So you mentioned Health and Mind has been the only location in which you've practiced so far. And in order to practice in the field of counseling, you first have to go through a pretty significant amount of schooling at the graduate level. So maybe we back up even before that to undergrad, and before that, I guess maybe asking you, did you always want to be a counselor? What were sort of your career aspirations that led up to this?
Okay. So no, I did not always want to be a counselor. At least I didn't always think I wanted to be a counselor. Starting out, my undergrad degree is in elementary education. So I started out as an elementary school teacher, and I was an elementary school teacher for about 9 years. Around about year 6, I started to feel like being in the classroom wasn't necessarily my end goal. But through working with students and seeing some of the needs in the classroom and wanting to help them on different levels, that led me to counseling, seeing that there were some mental health needs, seeing things in the school system and not always seeing those needs met, and wanting to do more led me to decide to pursue my graduate degree in counseling. And so around 2017, I decided that I was going to take that step to obtain my degree in counseling.
Got you. 9 years in the teaching field, and then you decided there's more to it. There's more to what you want to do than just being a full-time teacher. And I like to think that teachers do so much, but at the same time, because they're doing so much, it's hard to focus in on specific issues with specific students. Is that sort of kind of where you're coming from?
Yeah, because as a teacher, you serve in so many different capacities. Sometimes you're the nurse, sometimes you're, for some kids you serve in like a parent capacity. Sometimes there's so many different capacities that you operate in as a teacher, but there's also constraints to how much you can do.
Right.
And so I think that was more of seeing this need for these children, and not just for the children, but, I interact with parents too, and seeing this need overall, and wanting to be able to meet that need and not being in a position where I could, just because I was a teacher. So I wasn't really in a position to help in that area. So my area was academics. That's what I was there to do. And so that's kind of where my focus had to be, on top of still operating in the nurse role and the parent role and sometimes in all of those roles. But still not being able to address the need that I saw that I really wanted to address, not being able to do that in that capacity.
Right, because as you mentioned, academics was probably the main focus, and maybe from your vantage point, well, no, these mental health needs or these relational needs are really what I think is important. But obviously as a teacher, you got 20 kids that need your attention. That's tough to do. Okay, cool. So that makes a lot of sense to me. When in this 9-year journey did you start to think, okay, I don't know if this is going to be able to hit all of my goals being a teacher?
Interesting that you asked that question, because my first year in, I said, I'm not sure that I can see myself being in the classroom. I know teachers that have been in the classroom for years. They've been in the classroom 20 years. And I remember having a conversation with my mother, and I said to her, I don't know that I can do this for 10 years. I don't see myself making it to 10 years. But I got into it, and the first couple years, I think I just kind of ignored that feeling. I'm like, okay, it's kind of working. It's working. But I would say around year 4, year 5 is where I really started to feel that this isn't going to reach all the goals. You know, I can't meet all the needs that I want to meet. That's when that desire to do more really started to kick in. But of course, I remained in the classroom, but I did decide to finally at least start pursuing counseling.
Yeah, teaching wasn't a misstep in any way because you were doing so much of what you love to do. You just knew deep down that there's something about this that it's not going to be my long term. I'm going to make a
Yes, and
career at some point.
I knew it wasn't going to be long term and interesting. I actually initially, when I first decided to go back to school, I actually initially was going into a school counseling program.
Mm.
And 2 days before I was supposed to start that program, I changed my mind because I wanted to be able to work outside of school. And I knew there were some differences in school counseling and in the professional counseling realm, and I wanted to have an impact outside of the school.
I
2
can,
days before, 2 days before I changed my mind.
yeah, like that move of teacher to school counselor to counselor. I can really relate with being in a role and feeling like it's not the right one. And
Mm-hmm.
so I think, well, maybe I don't want to jump ship completely. Maybe I'll pivot a little bit. And then I think the farther you move forward, though, you start to know what's for you and what's not for you. So you got into, you left, you said, what was 2017? Is that when you started school?
That's when I started school. I started school around 2017.
Okay. Once you started to get into the curriculum of counseling, and maybe you can take us all the way up to when you start actually applying the stuff you're learning, what were you feeling like through that versus being a teacher?
It was very different. But then there were also some similarities because, going into teaching, there had to be classes in like child development, why certain behaviors and how to respond to certain behaviors and things like that. And so going into counseling, there was some of that, but it was a little bit different because it was much more in depth, more details when it comes to studying those types of things. And so I was really intrigued by it because in my education going into teaching, that part of the curriculum then really I found really interesting. I found really, really interesting. And so when I got into the counseling part of it and I started to learn even more about, human behavior and why certain things, why we behave in certain ways and what can impact that and all of that. And then learning, the interventions and things like that. It excited me because I'm like, I felt this before, and that was just kind of scratching the surface. But now going into it into more depth, I definitely felt like, okay, I'm on the right track. Like it excites me. I want to learn more. I want to know more. I want to do more. So it kept me interested. And so because it was really difficult kind of juggling both, I was a full-time teacher, trying to do all of that, and then life in general, and then also being a student. So, but that interest and that drive that I had on the inside of me to learn more about mental health and how to address the different mental health diagnoses and how to intervene, put in those interventions and things like that. I think that really just kept me going. It kept me going even, like I said, it wasn't always easy, but it kept me going. And it was different, but I never really paid a whole lot of attention to the differences in the fields. I just kind of, while still teaching, while still learning and, growing in that area, I knew that it was necessary to still put that same focus into.
Yeah, you weren't comparing them because you realized you had kind of found your lane, and you didn't need to think about, okay, now am I still using this skill here? It's like you were learning in such a different way and at such a different level of depth that it sounds like you're kind of off to the races. It wasn't like a looking back like, man, maybe I don't know if this is for me. You sound like you found a place where your intellectual curiosity was absolutely being satisfied, and nothing in what you said would indicate that you thought, okay, maybe I can't do what I want to do in this field. Everything was lining up.
Yeah, It all lined up. It all lined up. It felt right. It felt right, and I wanted to know more. Starting out with the basics, and then it's like, well, I want to know more. I want to know more. I want to know more. And so, wanting to know more, and then getting to the point where, so I got my degree through Liberty University. And most of my classes were online. I was an online student. But then we got to the point of those intensive courses where I would actually go to campus and be able to actually engage with people and put those things that I was learning to use. And that was always exciting for me, to be able to interact with others who were at the same point that I was at, who were working toward the same goal, and to be able to really use and implement those things that I was learning.
What did that do for you?
Um, for lack of better words, it made it real. If that makes sense. It started to make it real. Because it's like, now I'm not just learning this and now applying it, I'm able to actually start applying it. And so, of course, that made me even more excited. And it really, because I'm gonna be honest, I had never been to counseling myself. So it's like, I'm going into a field I've never experienced it as a client. I've never, had the opportunity to actually work as a counselor. And then going on to campus, I actually got to experience both, because of course we had to practice those skills and things like that. And so I got to be in both roles. I got to, be the client, and then I also got to be the counselor. And so, it just strengthened that thought that I'm moving in the right direction.
I'm really happy to hear that. Our stories are very similar in a handful of ways. One in which we're both teachers. You were a classroom teacher. I teach music. I went into counseling through Liberty, and that first, what was it? Would you call it? The first intensive was the first time I experienced counseling, like in the receiving end and giving it. And it was super hard not to feel like a fraud in the counseling seat, and then also like uncomfortable being counseled, because it was such a new experience. And like you said, I was trying to put what I learned to use, but I was also still trying to figure out, who am I going to be in this seat? Who am I going to be in this field? And I remember, for me, it sounds like we had a similar experience in that, even though my identity wasn't solidified in it, it felt like the right place. It was like, okay, this is where I think I need to be. And I think that speaks to the what would I say? Maybe like the variability that there are out there with counselors.
Yeah.
There's solution focused, there's non-directive, there's people that just focus on trauma, and you can kind of bring your own style into the therapy room. Obviously, we all have certain things that we stick to, certain ethical standards and legal standards, but I think therapy, or being a therapist so far, neither of us are licensed yet, but in our journey so far, it's been really interesting to see how our personality comes through, and then how learning things change how we might see the field. I know my view on everything keeps evolving as I move forward, and that kind of brings up another question from me to you is, what sort of things that you've learned have inspired you? What sort of parts of the field are you interested in?
So I am very, very interested in learning more about play therapy. The teacher in me, there's a part of that that's still there. And so I really enjoy working with children. And so that's kind of, I would say, like my next goal, or what I want to work towards, is becoming a registered play therapist as well. But that is kind of, like I said, that's where my focus is. But right now, I'm not at that point. But I think that's where I would say that's where that's the part that I'm most interested in, and kind of like working with children when they've experienced, these things, whether it's trauma, whatever it is, and being able to help them at this age, so that as they grow and develop, try to catch that and help them work through it now, so that it doesn't continue to impact them as they grow older. So that's kind of, which goes back to that concept of human behavior and all of those things. Everything kind of ties back to that for me. Why do certain mental illnesses develop? What impacted that? What happened to maybe start those symptoms, and maybe leading up to that. And sometimes there may not be any one thing that we can pinpoint right away, but just being able to kind of work with children in the capacity where we can kind of start addressing it at a younger age, so that as they grow and they develop, we can help with those.
I really like what you said there. I work with a few children, and it's not often I sit there and think about the fact that changes that are made now at these young ages, that's like compounding interest in their future. If they can
Yeah.
make a really solid behavioral change or belief change about themselves, or
Mhm.
change in their environment, who knows the extent to which that can benefit their lives. And so, no, that inspiration makes a lot of sense to me. It seems like you have a real appreciation for looking at the whole picture of like sort of where the issue might have come in and where we can take it. Um, so that's interesting too to me. Uh,
Yeah.
Playful.
Even with, I'm sorry.
No, it's okay. Go ahead. What were you gonna
Even with adults, I'm very likely to go back to, like, where did this all start?
say?
Let's go back to that time. Where did this start? And then let's kind of work our way up to where we are now. And then what do we do from here? Um, but yeah, that's where a lot of my interest is, because I feel like we have to look at the big picture to
Mm-hmm.
kind of see how we got to where we are right now.
So what sort of tools do you like to use when you're sort of excavating somebody's past or somebody's family system? How do you go about learning about that?
So I'm really big on talking. We just kind of talk through it. Um, if there's trauma, we process that trauma through talking. Now with children, a little bit different. A lot of times I will do different activities where we do drawing, or a lot of drawing. I do a lot of drawing with my younger clients, just because they can't always verbalize. But sometimes they can put some things into drawing that'll prompt a conversation that'll take us to exactly where we need to go. And a lot of things come out through the drawings and through the different activities that I do with them. With adults, I do activities with them sometimes as well. I'm a big fan of, especially because when most adults come in, they can say, "Hey, I experienced this, and now this is where I am. This is what's going on." And so a lot of times we just talk about going back to that time and talking about how they felt during that time, what that time was like for them. Um, and I found that to be a really effective method. Of course, it can prompt a lot of emotion. A lot of things can tend to come out from that. But sometimes I think that that's the start of it. Getting to that point where we get back to where we first felt those emotions, first had this experience, and dealing with what was felt in that moment.
Right. Yeah, that makes sense. Something that I've been learning about is, as far as the intake process, doing different assessments to figure out, because sometimes people come in thinking something's an issue, and then you get into it and you realize it's something different. And
Yeah.
when I work with kids, unfortunately, I get the experience of parents feeling as if there's something wrong with my kid. Here you go, fix them.
Mm-hmm.
And what something that I think you bring up is usually a whole system that the child's a part of that
Mm-hmm.
is really creating the behaviors. And so something that I've been taught to do is do a genogram,
Mm-hmm.
and through a genogram you find out, the family's use of substances, religiosity, what were relations like in the parents' homes growing up, what were sort of the personality tendencies, who was sort of the disciplinarian, and how did they carry that out, how often were you hugged, like questions like that where people are kind of like,
Yeah.
it feels weird to answer, but then you really get a nice picture, I think, of what the child's experience is like, because to your point, it's hard for them to express these things verbally. And so
Mm-hmm.
pictures is a way in which you seem to work with the kids. I'm lucky enough to be in person with a lot of my kids now. And so play, like running around, kicking a ball
Yeah.
around. Have you ever heard of symbolic interaction
I
therapy?
have not actually.
So I don't think this is something major in our curriculum, but it was sort of a one-off thing where we got to choose a thing to study. And I read on it. I thought it was kind of cool. I'll probably butcher it because it was just I did one project on it, but the gist of it was that you would just bring raw energy, emotion, and silliness into the room and break up the monotony of, I've got to come to a therapy session and talk about it. It's like, I'd make a weird noise. I'd go, hey, just like something silly. And it would break up kind of that feeling. And then what ends up happening from that was kids might take on a character, and all of a sudden they're beating up a villain, and then you can kind of get into, so anyway, I'm going on a bit of a tangent, but I think that figuring out that initial process is huge, and then you start to get into it. And I think that's another cool part about the therapy, is that it's a chemical reaction, or chemistry between you and the client. And so every one of my relationships with my clients looks a little bit different for that reason. And different things I find work, and some things don't work for others that you think are going to be great, and a lot of trial and error.
A lot of trial and error. What was, you said symbolic?
Symbolic.
I'm interested in learning more about it.
Symbolic interaction therapy. And yeah, I thought it was super cool, and it made me think of being at a party that's really tense and boring and nobody wants to talk, and then some guy just starts dancing, and then all of a sudden everybody loosens up a little bit. That's kind of what it made me think. Yeah. I find that kids are all about drama. They want to be in the drama. They don't want to have boring, adult talk all the time. It stiffens them up. It makes them think, okay, I'm not part of this. But when you can create a story, kids can follow that, and they want to be involved in that.
Yeah, I agree. That's definitely something that I'm definitely interested in learning more about. Like I said, play therapy definitely has my interest, but I think that this is definitely something that I'd be interested in just maybe researching and learning more about for myself, because I agree. It can be tough for a kid to come to therapy. It can be really, really tough. Sometimes they have this concept that, they don't want to come because they don't want to go sit and talk to someone. It's just not fun. Not fun.
What does it say about you? Like, what are the messages they're getting too when you sit down in a room and, you're going there because your parents want you to go there, but you don't know what the parents have said to them in the car. Oh, you're going here because we're going to work on this behavior. And then the kid comes in thinking, okay, I'm a problem. And thankfully not all parents do that. I have a lot of kiddos where that's not the case, but you just don't know what happens behind closed doors. And so you do get some kids coming in thinking they're in trouble, and it's just kind of a more stiff starting off. So yeah, I think introducing play, the symbolic interaction therapy, I should learn more about it too. I think it'd be kind of cool. But where were we? We were talking about things that inspire you in the field, and you discussed how play therapy is something you really enjoy, and that one of your goals is to become a registered play therapist.
Yes.
Do you have any other goals, or do you have like a vision for your career as you move forward and get your LPC?
So my ultimate goal at some point is to have my own practice. That's kind of been my goal from the beginning. Going into this, I had the mindset that I wanted to eventually at some point. Definitely not something that I see in the near future, but at some point, working toward that. But that and play therapy are the two. Those are really my two goals right now. I feel like as I continue to grow as a therapist, I'm sure that there'll be more goals that will kind of develop, because play therapy wasn't always the goal. But that's just kind of as I've gone through my schooling process and all of that, that desire for play therapy has definitely grown. And so I've kind of started to look into like, okay, what are the steps to becoming a registered play therapist? All of those things. But right now, those are the goals that I have right now.
It's pretty wild, this whole process that we're in. Like, we're still in a learning process, but in order to continue to grow, it's like we have to search out more growth processes while we're already in one.
Yeah.
It can feel like school all the time, but I think your drive and your purpose and your interest probably don't make it feel so like it's so much work to do that kind of a thing.
Yeah, it definitely doesn't. Of course, sometimes, as always, everything can kind of get overwhelming at times. But when I kind of take a step back and kind of remember why I went in this direction, what I'm working toward, all of those things, it's always easy to get back into that mindset where it feels so tough anymore.
Yeah. Whenever I have a tough session, or I feel like I didn't do the best job in that moment, and I think back on it, and I always have a moment where I go, am I in the right field? Like I always have that thought. And then the thing that gets me away from it is I think, what else would I be here on this planet to do? And it's like, nothing. This is totally it. Without a question, this is it.
Yeah.
And that sort of brings me back. So with that in mind, what are some challenges that you find in this field?
Um, Challenges. I'm just trying to figure out where to start. Cause I not that, just trying to think. Challenges. I would say one of the biggest challenges is sometimes it can be easy to what's the word I'm looking for? Okay, let me back up. Um, I would say challenges would be sometimes being able to determine the right intervention or if an intervention is necessary. I find that a challenge sometimes because, of course, you want to do the right thing that's going to help the client. And so just determining whether, the route that you're going or the intervention that you're using is really the best or the most appropriate. And that's where I think, research and learning and all of that comes. And I feel like it's constant learning because there could always be another intervention that you can use. But just choosing, the best and most beneficial intervention. Also find I would say um, diagnosing is a challenge. I find that to be a challenge, and I would say that just because you want to make sure that it's the right diagnosis, you don't want to diagnose someone and it not be the appropriate diagnosis. So making sure that it's appropriate, and again, just making sure that you're always learning. And one thing I'm not afraid to do in this field is ask for help, is ask for help. Because I always think it's necessary. It's necessary. My supervisor, she'll get an email or something, just to let her know, hey, I need some assistance. Because, at the stage that we're at, we're still learning. We're still growing. And I feel like learning and growing is going to be part of this field. I don't feel like, once you're licensed, the learning stops. But being able to, ask for assistance if you need it. Ask for some guidance, I guess I would say.
Yeah, the tension of dealing with not knowing what you don't know when you're
Mm-hmm.
when you're in the quote unquote expert chair. Um,
It's
that
hard when you're supposed to be you know what, I think that's the biggest challenge. When you're supposed to be the expert, it's hard. It's a challenge when you feel like maybe I'm not the expert in this situation, or maybe I'm not 100% sure of you know, which way I could go, or maybe I don't know what I don't know, and now this opportunity or this situation has presented itself, and I'm like, okay, maybe I'm not exactly an expert on this particular thing. So yes, feeling like you should be the expert, but not always, feeling like you have the tools because like you said, you don't know what you don't know until you need it.
yeah, I think that's the part of this field that I love and hate. It's a constant battle because the benefit, as you've already mentioned, is you continue to learn. And so I feel like my ability to listen and be present with people always is growing because I think those are my only tools in those moments when I don't know, is to shut up, figure out what I can figure out. And then there's a level of humility too when you have to tell a client, I don't know if I say I don't know very often, but when I don't know and I just listen, that's sort of another intervention that I tend to utilize when I'm not sure exactly where to go. That sort of non-directive, just listening to what's going on and the clarifying statements and the reflections, all of those things I know are going to help minimally while I'm thinking of, okay, what's going on here. And so I I don't know where I got this metaphor from, but like what we do isn't we're not plumbers. We're not fixing toilets. We're working with human beings, like the most complex thing ever. So yeah, I really resonate with what you said, that standing in the tension of it. My problem or challenge with counseling is way more surface level. I find that the amount of um, communication that's required outside of the session and the boundaries that you have to maintain when certain clients are challenging those boundaries. I've learned that I am a bit of a nice guy, and this field is beating that out of me slowly but surely, that if you don't have your boundaries, no one's going to have them for you. You're kind of on your own here. And so I think I had this notion in my head that, well, I'm a good guy, I'm a counselor, so they're going to be really fair to me and they're going to work with me. It's like,
yeah,
no, like they're going to get what they need. And if you make your boundaries firm, things will go well. If you don't, they may or may not, act the way you're expecting them to. They're all human beings too. So you don't know, you can't predict how things will go. So that's been a challenge. But again, it's what's cool about this field is all the challenges make us, I think, stronger people. So I
I
don't know.
definitely agree with that. I think that can be a challenge, like you said, setting those strong boundaries. Because, like you said, we're nice, and so it's like, well, we don't want to feel like, then questioning, well, not questioning, but it can be tough. It can be tough to set those boundaries, but it's also necessary. And like you said, it's helping us to learn and to grow in that area as well, because that is definitely something that I have had to be intentional about. Had to be intentional about that, because my natural self doesn't want to do that, or my natural self doesn't necessarily. I don't just do that naturally, I would say. So being intentional about making sure that the boundaries are set and that they're clear.
Yeah.
That's clear. Yeah.
Yep. So we talked about the challenges, and I think through talking about the challenges, we brought up the benefits that those challenges are making us grow. I'm wondering, are there any other big benefits of being in this field that you've noticed outside of obviously your mission and what you're going to do, but like for you personally being in the field, what's that like for you and on the positive end?
I would say one of the benefits is seeing how beneficial this field really is. As I said, when I started, prior to going into counseling, I knew what counseling was, but I'd never had any experience with it. And being in this field, seeing how beneficial this field really is to people. Like you said, we're working with humans. It's not, it's complex, but it's also necessary. It's necessary. And just being in a position where I'm more educated in the field, so I can help educate others about the field. There's so many misconceptions about the field of counseling. And so just seeing the benefit of it and being able to be a part of that, I would say for me is one of the great benefits, being able to be a part of such a beneficial field, such a needed field.
Yeah. 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 There's something to that, right? Like if you feel like what you're doing is important, it makes you want to do it to the best of your ability, and it keeps you engaged while you're doing it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Definitely. Definitely.
That's like another sort of dichotomy there, is like the tough part of counseling is that when you're working, you're with the person. So you can't look at your phone, you can't go to the bathroom. But
yeah.
the benefit is that when we're working, what we're doing is meaningful, or it's intended to be at the very least, right?
Yes. I agree. It's very meaningful.
Yeah.
Very meaningful work.
So, that we have this wellness. You're fine. We have the 6 tenets of wellness with, Wow Wednesday. We talk about the ACEs study. So as a reminder, the 6 tenets are mental health, mindfulness, healthy relationships, nutrition, sleep, and exercise.
Mm-hmm.
Charlotte, I'm curious, where do you think you are rocking it when it comes to those tenets, and where do you think you could use some work or some change? Maybe might be a better way to put it.
Definitely, I would say mindfulness. I feel like I'm rocking that a little bit. I've become so much more I know a lot of people know the word mindfulness, but actually using it myself. I implement it with my clients, but then I also use it myself, and it's so It's so necessary. It helps me to calm. It helps me to stay calm. In a moment where I'm feeling really anxious, I'm going to take a few seconds to step out of it and go into that mindfulness mode. So definitely rocking it there.
Before we go to the challenge, I want to know more about that journey, because I think everybody that starts in mindfulness, especially us Western folk, my journey was a little wonky. I bet yours was too, because it's something you had to probably look out on your own and figure out. So just tell me a little bit about how you got into mindfulness and what your practice with it's like.
So starting my counseling program at Liberty helped me to get into mindfulness. I think that's really when I first started hearing about mindfulness. I'm like, it's kind of interesting. And so that prompted me to study it a little more for myself, to do a little bit more research for myself. And through that, just learning a variety of techniques that I have found to be so useful. Something as simple as deep breathing. I deep breathe on a daily basis. Deep breathing on a daily basis. There's also the 5-4-3-2-1 method that I use. Just using my 5 senses to be more present, be aware of my surroundings. So I use that a lot. Taking time with myself. I will literally go into a room, close the door, and just sit myself in the quiet, eyes closed, and just kind of, again, take in what's around me, listen to the sounds around me, listen to, the silence around me, the silence, because most of the time there is. Implement that with my deep breathing. And those are the areas where I use it the most. I'm going to be very honest. I get anxious a lot. I get anxious with work-related stuff. I get anxious with life-related stuff. And so in those moments, it's necessary for me to implement a lot of those techniques, especially the ones that I found beneficial. Like I said, deep breathing has been so beneficial for me. And so being able to use that, and then also being able to use that in session with my clients. It's something that I'm very comfortable with because it's something that I use myself. So I'm very comfortable with being able to guide my clients through deep breathing or through the 5-4-3-2-1 technique. And I'm interested in learning about more techniques that I can implement for myself, but that I can also use with my clients. Anxiety is an area that I feel like I have a lot of experience in. I've worked with a lot of clients who deal with that. And so I feel like mindfulness is a great tool for at least starting to manage some of those symptoms.
Thank you for sharing all that. I couldn't agree more that, like, my weaknesses, I put that in air quotes, have become my strengths. It's the area in which you grow from. It's the area in which you're curious about to begin with. And you're like, how can I do better here? Like, I know for me, like, my boundaries were rough from the get-go of counseling. And that's something that I feel I'm so conscious of, that I'm always growing in. If you feel like you're anxious and you're conscious of the mindfulness practices, then you're getting so much practice and you're delivering that practice, and nothing teaches you better than when you can explain something to somebody.
Exactly. And I think that's why I feel like that's the area I'm rocking it, because I'm using it, and then I'm also helping my clients use it as well. So definitely feel like I'm rocking that area.
Right on.
Yeah.
Moving to the other side now. What's being neglected?
Ooh.
If anything, it have to be.
Yeah. Can you run them down to me one more time? I
Yeah.
always feel like I forget one.
We got mindfulness, mental health, healthy relationships, nutrition, sleep, and exercise.
Oh, exercise.
Yeah.
Exercise. It's a challenge. Making the time. And sometimes there is the time and I still don't. So exercise, well, I'd say to exercise and nutrition. So
both of them
are definitely areas that I need to improve in. I keep telling myself it's on my list of things to do, but it's kind of being neglected right now. It's kind of, I'll start next week. I'll eat better next week. But today I want to eat my chocolate, so I'm going to eat my chocolate today, and I'll start next week. Oh, today was a long day. I think I deserve, some dessert. I'll start next week. So those are definitely two areas where I feel are being neglected right now. Just gonna
Okay.
be honest with that.
All right. I appreciate the honesty.
Yeah.
Yeah, I find that those two are tough for people now more than ever. Yeah, I think that's accurate because we live such sedentary lifestyles. We're on the computer, we're indoors, there's COVID, and there's a bunch of work to do. And like, it's very easy in my mind to say that this project is more important than me taking care of my body because I'll be here tomorrow. And so that self-sacrificingness that makes us want to get into the counseling field, I think can enact itself when it comes to these tenants. And then the nutrition is like, well, that one's obvious. There's sugar in everything. And if you have any treats, for me, if there's treats in my house, I'm going to eat them. I don't have that ability to separate myself from it. I'm going to have eggs and broccoli. That doesn't happen.
Not gonna work. Yeah.
So I think I struggle with all of them in different ways. And I think I'm rocking them all in different ways as well. And so yeah, that's something I feel as I'm teaching them more, I'm thinking about them more too. So
Yeah.
that's been kind of cool with this podcast is I'm forced to think about it on a daily basis. What are we going to put out about this healthy relationship? Well, let me think, what about healthy relationships? So they're cool little guidelines to think about. And I've also found that if someone comes in, they're not sure what's going on in their lives, but they're experiencing anxiety or depression, or they're feeling like this isn't going right, whatever. If you go through the list, often you'll find that there's one or two or three or four that are being neglected. And it's like, oh, you went to sleep at 3 a.m. and then the night before that you went to sleep at 9 p.m. Maybe that's it's like
Yeah.
clear pretty quick. So yeah. Where to go
Yeah,
next?
I definitely agree with this new lifestyle where I'm spending more time at home.
Mm-hmm.
That has definitely impacted those areas that I'm neglecting. Definitely. With nutrition, it's just easier to go grab, a bag of chips as opposed to, a healthy snack.
Mm-hmm.
It's just, I don't know, it just seems easier. I'll just go grab this and eat this now, and then tomorrow I'll eat better. And it just doesn't happen. I definitely agree with you. Spending more time inside my house has definitely made it a lot harder to focus, to be intentional about those things. When it comes to the mindfulness and the mental health, I'm engulfed in that most of the time. That's where a lot of my energy is. So because I'm thinking about it, I spend a lot more time making sure that I'm taking care of that for myself as well. But when it comes to, like I said, the nutrition and the exercise, not as much attention going into that.
Yeah.
I'm gonna get better about it though. I'm gonna do that.
Okay. All right. Cool. Next time we have you on, we'll ask about it. Like, how's this?
Yes, definitely ask me about it. Definitely ask me about it.
I'm happy to hear that the things that you've been implementing are things that you're able to communicate to your clients and work with your clients. Because I do think mindfulness and mental health of those 6 tenets are the ones that people don't know a lot about,
Yes.
typically. And so I think that is important that we're out there teaching people about it, because I think it's benefited both of our lives greatly. So, yeah. Well, I don't want to keep you too long because we are getting towards about the 50-minute mark.
Okay.
But I want to tell the listeners that you are working at Health and Mind. You're a resident there. Are you currently taking clients? What kind of clients do you work with?
I am currently taking clients. I work with clients, variety of ages, variety of needs. I've worked with clients as young as 4 and as old as 65. So just being honest, anywhere in between. And each time I find that, oh, I enjoy working with people this age. Oh, I enjoy working with people this age. Always makes me nervous when there's a new age range, but I don't have any limits on age. I work with anxiety, depression, trauma. So I'm open to all clients. I have right now I've only worked with individual clients. I have not done couples or family therapy or anything like that. But I'm also open to that as well because again, that helps me to learn and it helps me to grow. So I am very much still taking clients and available for clients. Right now, I'm only seeing clients virtually, just due to COVID and things like that. But I am hoping to, in the near future, transition back into seeing clients in person.
Right on. Well, Charles, thanks again for being with us today. I'm very happy that someone in the field is as eager to learn as you are, and also eager to teach and apply the things that they're learning to their own lives. I think that's so important in the field that we're in, that we're speaking from a place of experience, and we're speaking from a place of genuine care and purpose. And it was really cool to hear your story today, and that, kind of your journey to what brought you here and where you plan to go in the future. So thanks again for being on. And thank you to the WOW community for being with us today. Feel free to follow us on Spotify or Google Podcasts for more episodes. For questions, comments, or concerns, you can email us at intern@healthandmind.net. And lastly, don't forget to follow us on social media. We are on Instagram and Facebook at HIMRVA. And all you do, keep your health in mind.